Bonjour everyone, I am Anis Kayes and welcome to Parlez-Vous CEO, where we ditch the corporate talk and get real about entrepreneurship. Each week, I chat with founders and CEOs who build businesses their way, through the failures, pivots, and breakthroughs. And they bring the fire. Plus, I'll drop some golden nuggets of wisdom from my own entrepreneurial journey. This is your space to grow, learn, and evolve with a true growth mindset. Remember, success isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. Now let's kick things off and get this party started. Hello, bonjour, bonjour, hello. Welcome to another episode of Parlez-Vous CEO. My name is Anis Kayes and I am your host. And I have a very exciting guest today. I am so pumped to have with me Jani Moon, who is my media coach as well. Hi, Jani.
Hi, so grateful to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you. For our listeners and who are new to the podcast, Jani Moon here with me has been tremendously helping me with going on camera, with my social media, with my branding, with my voice and tone. So for anybody thinking about starting a brand and going on camera and going on social and building authority, Jani Moon is amazing. I've known her for 10 years. She's also a dear friend. And I'm delighted to have you here with us, Jani. First, I'd love to start with the origin of why you started doing what you were doing. Tell us a little bit more about where it all came from.
Yeah, so first of all, if you don't mind, I just want to just tell your listeners a little bit about what media coaching is, because some people may not know. You hire a media coach when you really want help expressing yourself in a more confident, authentic, joyful way, when you really are pulling out your most amazing self-expression. And so so much of media coaching is about connection. It's so much about connecting to your audience, to the people you're interviewing. And I was broken in that area a long time ago. My hero's journey story is I was in a sexless marriage. I was estranged from my sister. I couldn't even hug and I couldn't connect with people. And it's funny, it's like that, all that personal chaos, how is that tied into media coaching? But so much of it is about connection and really about connecting with people in an authentic, real way. And so, fast forward, after doing so much work on myself, so much of my, you all are going to, Anne and I are the two types that just giggle. We are just going to be giggling about everything. So let's just get out of the way. We're going to be giggling. But after, going through that hardship, and spending so much time learning how to connect, it totally birthed me into becoming a media coach, which was just helping people connect more deeply to their voices, to their creativity, to their self-expression, and being able to connect with their audiences.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love this. And so in your own words, could you explain what exactly is media coaching and why would people listening might need a media coach?
Yeah, so so much of media coaching is helping people to be confident on videos and hosting their own podcast, get on stage, all of that. The stats are crazy. Like 78% of customers prefer learning about a product or service on video. There's 135 million people that listen to podcasts. I listened to a stat that it has grown 200% plus over the last 10 years. It just keeps growing. So you need to be on, if you want to be a thought leader and you want to be the face of your company, it is imperative for you to do videos and eventually potentially do a podcast as well, because you have to get your message out there, which ties directly into storytelling and the importance of storytelling, which I think we'll probably talk about later. It's so important to be on social, even though it can be cringe.
Absolutely, I understand you. And for instance, it was my mistake to never go public before in my own journey, in my own entrepreneurial journey. So 10 years ago, I started my company, but I wanted to have a faceless brand. I was basically hiding behind my brand. And it's only 10 years later, so last year, that I really decided to put my face on my branding and start to build a personal brand. And I've realized social media is not necessarily about direct conversion. It's really about lead nurturing and also for clients to get a feel whether they want to work with you, if they like you and trust. So I think it's a very interesting exercise that even though I was a marketer, I was not doing it for myself.
Mhm.
And if there is a piece of advice that I would give our listeners today is the sooner you start, the better you get at it because you will get the reps, you will go on camera, you will fail, you will feel cringe, you will get
Mhm.
uncomfortable. My recommendation would be get a coach immediately if you're not feeling super comfortable, and that would be normal not to be comfortable. And the reps, right? Doing it as many times as possible. And Jenny, I wanted to ask you, so you've joked that you blend spirituality with media coaching. What do you mean when you say that?
Yes, yes. I know my friend wanted me to be coined the mystic media coach, and I was like, that's a little too cheesy for even me. But I'm a big yogi and I'm a big meditator, and so much about being awesome on camera and being a host on podcasts, there's a lot of similarities. Like, first of all, Anne, for you to be an awesome host with me right now is presence. Like, you have to be fully present. Can't be thinking about what you're going to be eating for dinner. You need to be present, listening, being aware of any thoughts that come up. And sometimes those thoughts can be judgments of like, F that up. Or
Mhm.
sometimes they're intuitive thoughts of like, this is something I need to ask Jani in this moment that feels important and that's going to elevate this conversation. So that's a huge piece of just presence. And also just, especially when you're doing videos, you can get the monkey mind terribly.
Mhm.
And the monkey mind, even when you're hosting podcasts, anytime you're doing any public speaking. And so much of this is about, this is a meditation. If you can think about all of this is not just going to help you level up your brand. It's going to help you level up you because you're
Mhm.
going to be able to deal with all the voices and the noise because you're going to be able, as those voices and noises come in, you're going to be able to let them float away so that you can be a clear channel for your flow and authentic expression, which
I love that. I love that. Jenny Moon, can you tell our audience a bit more about what you call a monkey mind, especially when you're going on camera, on podcast? Like what happens exactly in our mind? I mean, most people's mind when they go on camera. Describe to us what a monkey
Oh
mind is.
Lordy. I mean, any of you who've tried to hit that record button, even me. I mean, Ann and I's favorite word is we feel cringe. But it's like there's so many judgments and fears and thoughts that can come into the mind. Like, I hate the way I look and sound. I have imposter syndrome. I have nothing, no one's gonna listen. Why I don't have anything important to say. Oh, all those dark thoughts can come in and like a tornado, you can just be wiped out like a wave. And, your job and our job right now is that, and when these voices come in, again, and this is again why I say so much of expressing yourself in the media is spiritual because it is a meditation because you allow those voices to go on by so that you can be more present with yourself, with your audience, to all of you wonderful people listening and to the guests that you may be interviewing in the moment.
Mhm. And do you have any tips for anyone who is suffering from imposter syndrome, like right before going on camera or going to sales pitch, doing a
Yeah.
presentation, or it's even like going on a date in this situation where there can
Yeah.
be like social anxiety? What would be your tip to manage imposter syndrome?
I think my first thing is to validate that we all have it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if I've ever met a single human on the planet that hasn't ever said that they haven't ever had imposter syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, imposter syndrome really is about you feeling that you aren't good enough in the moment. And it comes from a place of insecurity. And
Mm-hmm.
when we realize that, we know that, okay, this rational brain, this is a place of insecurity. I feel like I'm not good enough to be doing XYZ. Well, let's reframe it. Like sometimes the best thing you can do is if you can learn to be your own coach, like if you can learn to be that wonderful mama bear, papa bear to your little girl, to your little
Mm-hmm.
boy, if you can be that drill sergeant or that fairy godmother, if you can learn to parent that wounded part of you that has those insecurities and coach yourself in the moment. And so, yeah, maybe let's pretend I'm having imposter syndrome right now. And I'm like, I'm not good enough. I don't, I shouldn't even be doing this. I have nothing of value to say. Stop. Bring that parent on board, that drill sergeant, fairy godmother, whatever you need to be like, to coach yourself in the moment to be like, yes, you are. You've got this. You can do this. You have 20 plus years of experience. So it really is our job to parent ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to be awesome. And I think once you start to parent yourself, you can do away with imposter syndrome. I mean, that's one step.
Mm-hmm. I
And
love that.
to surround yourself like people like Anne who can tell me how awesome I am. So, she mirrors back that this is all BS.
Yeah, I completely agree with you with surrounding yourself with cheerleaders, because sometimes
Mhm.
you're not always going to be able to, have that nice voice or nice talk nicely to yourself. So the importance of support, when you can't parent yourself well, I completely agree with you. And Jenny, I would love to hear about some stories you have with clients that you worked with before and what you learned from them or from working with
So
some of your clients.
I've worked with some, fairly big names. I was Mel Robbins, radio producer,
Wow, I love Mel Robbins.
so many people do, and she's a badass. And I learned so much from her as a radio producer. I don't think she even knows that this. I would study how she could make someone cry within 3 minutes because she literally had such a deep listening. And so much of this is like, if you're going to get into coaching, or is like this deep listening where she could hear what the problem was and hit them with it. And they would just be like, and then give them a solution. And so I've worked with a lot of reality stars. I worked with Dr. Ish from Marriage Boot Camp. I worked with Tarek. I never can say his name right. Tarek El Muso from the HTV Flipper Flop show. Ted Gibson, What Not to Wear. Evan Carmichael. He's a big YouTube star, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these, I've had the great privilege of working with all of these people. But I think I will say I'll share two stories. And I'm gonna protect. I'm so tempted to say his name to out him, but I won't. I'm gonna take the high road. But I worked with one client where literally we had our first call, and I see this hand come across the screen, and it is his wife feeding him, spoon feeding him in front of me.
Oh my
And it was
God.
a total power play, right?
Oh my
Like
God.
already it was like this guy, and he was really well known, right? He's Mel Robbins status. And he was like, and it was already like, okay, this is not going to work, right? Because so much around, if those of you who are listening or who are coaches or who want to be coaches, a big piece around coaching is you have to have someone who is open to learn. I say you're in that, you've switched the flip to learner. He wasn't there, right? Needless to say, that was our only session. So, and that was like, but it's one of the craziest stories. I'm like, I just saw this hand.
Did you
And
say
like,
anything?
I was just in shock. I was like, is
Yeah,
this really happening?
I'm not sure
I
how
was,
I would react. I think I
I
would
was
just
just
be
like,
laughing. Yeah. I
okay.
mean,
I was just like, just listening, but in the subtext, like, okay, so he's telling
yeah.
me, I'm macho man, don't need you. I got my wife, hand feeding me. You have
Mm,
no power over me as my media coach. It was like one of those power plays. So that was weird. And then, I would say some of the biggest, and I worked with Sharon Lecter, who co-wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, I will share this, you know, with Sharon and some people when I was early days as a media coach, one of the hardest lessons I learned was pushing people too fast to be vulnerable. A big part of, you hear this all the time in media. You need to be vulnerable. You need to be real.
mhm.
And now we have all these new thought leaders out there, who have all these millennials, or what's the crew before millennials? I don't know, Gen Z, is it?
Oh, younger, yeah.
Yeah. But, they're just so used to doing videos on their phone and stuff. And they're so used to being so candid and so vulnerable. Well, for my generation and older generations, this is something that we're having to learn. And I learned early on that sometimes I would push people too soon to be vulnerable. And what would happen is if I would push them to be vulnerable too fast, like, tell me your darkest secret, your biggest trauma, in our first session, and they'd be like, blah, 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 blah. And then, it would open up this huge wound. and then, they couldn't do any more sessions because they were in their trauma. I mean, that was a biggie. That was a big rookie mistake back in the day, 20 years ago.
All right.
Yeah,
So
you
not
know.
opening up like the closets of darkness right away with people, right?
Vulnerability is so important to learn. I want to just say that if you're going to put yourself out there, you do need to open and be more vulnerable. I would say though, you need to honor where you're at and do
Mhm.
it in the stages. You don't want to open up trauma from it. You want to
Mhm.
do it where you can, it's in the perfect timing
Mhm.
to be able to share, because
Mhm.
we all have trauma, and
Mhm.
all of that trauma feeds into the way we express ourselves.
And so, to someone who you are coaching to be more vulnerable, what's the fine line between being vulnerable and not oversharing? I mean, that's something that I'm always trying to
Yeah.
balance because there's the work persona and the business persona. So, when do you know when maybe that people don't need to know about that versus being real and authentic?
I love that question, Anne. And I get that question a lot. I think a lot of it has to do with your intention. Like, why would you be sharing
Mm.
this? Right? Like,
Mhm.
why would you be like, when I shared earlier that, I started this media coaching journey around not connecting and learning how to connect, and that tied into media coaching when my ex-husband and left me the same day my sister was killed. That
Mhm.
level of vulnerability, there's a purpose to that vulnerability. I'm sharing it because it's part of my hero's journey story. It's part of my story of how I got here. And so I don't want you to be vulnerable just to be vulnerable, to just, just to be shocking. That's reality TV, right?
Mhm.
You are strategic in your vulnerability, and that this feels important to share because I think it's going to add a lot of value,
Mhm.
and it's going to help my audience connect to me more.
Mhm.
And so, those are the types of questions, is what's the intention behind it?
Yeah, so keeping in mind the intention if you're wondering, like, oh, that's, I feel on shaky ground, I want to share that, but remembering, like, why am I even sharing that in the first place?
Yeah.
What do I want to bring out to the world? How do I want to help my people and tying all of it in? And Jenny Moon, so about storytelling. So, what would you say is the role of storytelling in branding, and how can you really tell stories that resonate?
Well, first of all, I cannot impart how important storytelling is in branding. 22% people are more likely to remember you and the information you're sharing
Mhm.
through a story.
Mhm.
And there is a 30% conversion rate with effective storytelling when you're trying to sell products and brands.
Mhm.
There is cognitive impact where, like, it engages multiple parts of the brain. There's emotional resonance where I'm like, I can relate to you. So it makes me more connected to you. If you're going through a divorce and I tell a story about divorce, then I feel more connected to you and I'm more apt to want to buy a product or a service from you. So, and
Mhm.
again, 55% of customers want to buy from a company that has an awesome story. I mean, the stats and the research are beyond overwhelming.
Mhm.
And so your job when you tell a story is to take me on an emotional journey, to go from the highs to the low. And I think the thing is that most people, which ties into this vulnerability conversation, Anne, is
Mhm.
they are too scared to get to that, what I call your shit pit, the deepest, darkest place of where you came. Like imagine like the bottom of the ocean, the deepest dark, where Hades lives.
Mhm.
Like people don't want to go to that place in their storytelling. And it's just for a moment. Like it's just
Mhm.
like it's just for a moment, and that's when you hear people like giving TED Talks, like awesome people that have like, that's when you hear the pin drop. You're like, or the mic drop. You're like,
Mm.
it's just silence because they've
Mhm.
gone to their shit pit.
Mhm.
And that's where the treasure is. That's where the pearl is. That's where the wisdom is. And then they climb out, fall out. This
Mhm.
is where methodologies are born, courses are
Mhm.
born to get to the sandy beach where you teach me all that I have learned. But it
Mhm.
takes practice. It takes practice. It takes trust in yourself and your
Mhm.
ability to, and also like really connect to that part of you, because a lot of times it's scary to go there, and so a lot of people are like, I don't even want to touch that. So
Yep.
being courageous to go to those dark places and be honest around like, this is what I thought, this is what I felt, this is how I effed up, and this is what I learned, right? Um,
I love that. I love how you're describing it. I agree. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and so much, like you really need to be brave in order to, going from the shit pit to the sandy beach, like you're saying.
yeah.
I love that. I completely agree. And so the $1 million question, Jenny Moon, for you, who's a badass media coach, and I'm sure you're hearing it all the time. What do you recommend for showing up confidently on camera when hosting podcast or a show?
There's a lot of things that you can do, which you're doing, right? You are doing so much. You're just like, I'm just going to practice, practice, practice. It's like going to the gym. You sometimes have to fake it till you make it until there's a breakthrough. And you be in the cringe, be in the uncomfortableness until one day you wake up and you're like, this is kind of fun, right?
Mhm.
So that's part of it. And the other part is set and setting. They talk about this a lot in like psychedelic journeys, but it totally applies to what we're talking about in the media world. And it's about creating a setting that you are going to thrive in. What are you going to wear? How do you look? What's something that's going to make you feel really comfortable
Mhm.
so that you can feel good in your body. You want to feel good in your body and you want to feel safe and happy in your surroundings
Mhm.
so that you can relax, be comfortable, so that you can express yourself in the best authentic way. And Anne knows this because I was saying that, starting out, it's really great if you're doing videos sometimes to talk about maybe easy personal stuff first, like short little personal videos. And then if you're doing podcasts to interview friends, it's okay to have those training wheels on in the beginning, working with people that you're going to feel more comfortable with, that you can relax around, that you can have more fun with, that you can be more yourself. And the same with videos, doing short videos where you're talking about topics that are easier and light you up, that you're passionate about talking about.
Absolutely. It's easier to talk about something you're actually interested in than, not. I love that. And so, Jenny, what are some of the most common blocks that people face when they're trying to go on videos or podcasts?
I mean, you and I have talked about this so much ourselves, right? Even as a media coach, I have like the biggest cringe moments. There's so many blockages for so many of you I know that are listening. Imposter syndrome is a big one. There's so many. I think for me, sometimes I get to a place where it's like, this is my recent thing, is that I am not evolved enough, or I'm not in a place where I have a message that I is worthy of expressing to the
Hmm.
world, that I need to hone and it needs to be perfect, right? Perfection is a big one. Like we talk about imposter syndrome, it needing to be perfect is like on the other side of that,
Hmm.
is just like it has to be perfect, and that's a huge one that I've struggled with, and I know a lot of people do too, that everything has to be perfect, everything has to be in place, the brand has to be in place, I have to have the tagline, I have to have the right guests, all of it. And it just gets in your way because it prevents you from ever starting.
I agree with you. And it's interesting how even when we do something for the first time, like let's say it's your first podcast episode, or it's even your first podcast period, and that in your mind you would think that you're going to be perfect and great at it, that I think is really not helpful thinking. I think for somebody starting, I think it's the reps, man. I think it's really just
Yeah.
taking action, being perfect in the beginning. Like you can learn as much as you want how to do the right clean, or I do CrossFit, so how like to do weightlifting. You can train and watch videos as much as you want, but nothing is going to replace you going to the gym and doing the reps to get better at it. I don't know why some people like it stops a lot of people from doing what they want to be doing, starting a show or podcast, just because they're not going to be good at it. They didn't even give it the chance. They didn't even take the risk to be bad at it in the first place. But that's how you get good at everything, right?
Risk taking is huge. Being able to take risks and and being okay with failure.
And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people hide behind perfectionism because, right, nothing is perfect, especially not when you're starting something. So instead of saying, like, I only want to do it if it's 100%, like maybe start with, 20%,
Yeah.
realistic goals so that you're not putting
Yeah.
so much pressure on yourself that paralyzes you from doing the things you really want to be doing. So, Jenny, for someone who feels called to do videos or podcasts, but is scared to be seen or heard, what's that one first step that they can take today?
I think that one first step, especially for video, even if you don't post it, is just hit the record. People freeze just hitting record. Just walk around your apartment, hit record, start talking about something that's important. One little trick is to lead with a call to action. So if you lead with a strong statement, so if, whatever it is that you're feeling passionate about, like everyone needs to learn how to cook Mexican food, right? I love Mexican food. Like even just like talking about that, or, say it could be something silly or it could be something really dear to your heart. That, we need to save every child from hunger. If that's something that you feel very strongly about, lead with something that you feel really strongly about, whether it's silly or serious. Lead with that statement to just like anchor you, push you forward, and just riff on it, and then end with that statement. And that's just a great practice to start getting comfortable, just seeing and hearing yourself. And really what it's so much about, Anne, is like trusting your flow. It's like so much about this is flow, trusting the words that come out, not second guessing, not stopping what you're saying, any of that. You see, the best people out there are like the kings and queens of flow, creative flow.
And so how do you trust your flow? I mean, that's the thing, right? How do you trust yourself, especially when you're new?
Well, I think, let's be honest, in the beginning, you don't until you do. And it just kind of goes back to what you were saying, like
With the
in the
reps?
beginning. It's the reps and you being you're the best coach, you're, the best mama bear, papa bear, telling yourself that, but you also, there is a quality to flow, and you know it. Like, all of you know when you've been taught and you're like, you've got the thoughts and you're like you're not congruent versus where you're aligned and you're like, man, I was in the flow, and you're like, and when you're in the flow, it's like, and this is my belief system. It's like divine energy is flowing through you. And that's when creative genius comes out. Your creative genius can come out through words, through ideas, through collaboration. And, so much of this is about learning to flow.
I love that. I love that. And Jenny, if you had to leave our audience with some, I call them the nuggets, the golden nuggets of wisdom, what would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, there's a quote. I don't know who, I've never found out who wrote it, but I love it. It's very simple. It's self-expression is the spark of the soul made visible. Your truth spoken out loud, your essence brought to life. And ultimately, as a media coach, that's what I'm doing, which is trying to get you to really just be able to creatively self-express in your most authentic way. And that really is your soul speaking, right? And that's what we want. We want, if all our souls are speaking in the most creative, awesome way, then we're all living our divine blueprint. We're all living our divine purpose.
I love that. And Jani Moon, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Jani Moon and JaniMoon.com.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for being here and sharing your story today with our listeners.
I love you, Anne. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And that wraps up today's episode. I am Annelise Caillez, and I can't wait to join you again next week. Thanks for listening to Parlez-Vous CEO today. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep going. And connect with us on Instagram at Parlez-Vous CEO. I am Annelise Caillez, and I know some days are harder than others. On those tough days, think back to why you started. What you're doing today matters, even when you can't see the results yet. Ideas are great, but it's what you do with them that counts. Find everything we talked about today at parlezvousceo.com. See you next week, and you've got this.